Today's notes are 2.6. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Or, if you want the acronym, C.P.C.T.C. for short. All right? Now, what this theorem does is that as long as we can prove any of the triangle congruence theorems, we can then state that all the other parts in that triangle are also congruent by C.P.C.T.C. Essentially speaking, it's essentially what we discussed when we talked about the isosceles triangle back in Unit 2.3, where as long as we have two congruent sides and the vertex angle, we can assume that those bottom two angles might be congruent. Or another example of this would be if we had a reflexive property, we can assume that those lines are congruent because it's congruent to itself. This is basically an assumption that has been factually backed to where we can use it as a mathematical law. So for example, okay, let's see I have triangle HEY is congruent to triangle MAN by angle side. Okay? Okay? Brian, can you get the door for me, please? Thanks. Okay. So, now, the question we need to ask ourselves is this. What other parts of the triangle are congruent by C.P.C.T.C.? Okay, well, if we look at this, and by C.P.C.T.C., meaning that we know that these true triangles are congruent by that, so what other parts have to be congruent then? Well, we've got segment MN is congruent to segment HY, here and here. We can also say that segment EY is congruent to segment AN. Okay? And finally, we can then also say that angle H is congruent to angle M. All right? Now, and therefore these two triangles are congruent through and through by C.P.C.T.C. Last week we had a problem in particular we could not do. I talked about that briefly on the Canvas overview. But yeah, so hopefully now that you see this, you can see now what tool allows us to now complete if a triangle is in fact missing information. We can then do association in this slide. So moving on, let's take a look at another example or another situation, number 2. So let's say I had two triangles, CAT and RAP. Okay? And I say that triangle CAT is congruent to triangle RAP by what is the question? And we're going to find that out here once I give you guys these points in the given congruence. Well, we know that angle A is a vertical angle. That checks out. We know that these guys are going to be congruent. And we know that these guys are going to be congruent. So, by angle side angle, these triangles are the same. Ow. Stabbed myself with my own pen. I missed. All right. Therefore, all right, or 3 dots in triangular fashion. Okay, we know that angle P is congruent to angle T by C.P.C.T.C. We know that segment AT is congruent to segment AP, these guys, by again C.P.C.T.C. And we know that CT is congruent to RP by C.P.C.T.C. All right, let's look at one example as far as like using our proof concept. Overall, finding a proof and everything. Okay. So let's say I'm given that segment AC is congruent to AR and angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. We want to prove that angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. Okay? Now here's our triangles. That's LCA SR. All right. And the proof. 2, 3, 4. So, and what we're given is we know that segment AC is congruent to AR, and we know that angle 1 and 2, which are down here, are congruent to ourselves. And that's all we know. We want to prove that angle 3, which is up here, and angle 4 is congruent. Now with C.P.C.T.C, we can. Firstly, let's write our givens. I'm going to write them in one line this time. So AC is congruent to AR, and angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. 1 is given. Okay? Angle CAL is congruent to angle RAS by the vertical angle theorem. If you just wrote vertical angles, I'd be okay with that too. Okay? So these guys are congruent to each other. I probably should do them in different colors. Okay? Then triangle CAL is congruent to triangle RAS by angle, angle, side, right? So triangle CAL, angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side. And since they are congruent, that means that by corresponding parts, they are also, the whole things are congruent. So then we can say that angle 3 is indeed incongruent to angle 4 by C.P.C.T.C.